All right, everyone, buckle up because today we're diving into a topic many of you have been requesting: psychology. But this isn't just your average Psych 101. We're going deep into the mind and exploring how psychology shapes your everyday life in ways you might not even realize. Ever wonder why you keep repeating the same patterns in relationships, or why that catchy tune is stuck in your head for days? Well, get ready to crack open the mystery of human behavior with us and see how psychology holds the key to better decisions and deeper connections.
All right, everyone, we are diving into a topic I know a ton of you have been requesting: psychology. We're going deep, deep, deep today.
We are.
Get ready for, you could call it Psych 101, but with our own deep dive spin on it, of course.
Of course.
We're cracking open, let's talk psychology, understanding the basics. But, and I say this with emphasis, we are going way beyond the basics.
Yep.
Really going to apply it to your life.
That's right. We're gonna get into the nitty-gritty. We're gonna be like, how does this apply to my life?
Exactly. So forget those dusty old textbooks. This is about the psychology behind why you just keep falling for the same kind of people, or why that jingle is stuck in your head for days. I mean, we've all been there, right?
Absolutely. And how understanding those things can actually help you make better decisions.
Yeah.
And understand the people around you a little bit better.
Okay, so psychology. We all kind of have an idea, but to kick things off, give us the deep dive definition.
So at its core, psychology is about understanding the why behind human behavior and mental processes. But it's not just about what's happening in your own head. It's about the interplay between your mind and the world around you.
Okay, so it's not just me overthinking that awkward coffee shop encounter from this morning.
Not at all. That's actually a perfect example of social psychology at work. How our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are influenced by the presence of others, whether we realize it or not.
All right, so it's not just me then. Now, before we dive into the good stuff, I think it's helpful to remind everyone about the major branches of psychology.
Right, because psychology is a vast field. So you've got cognitive psychology, which delves into how we think, remember things, and make decisions. Like, ever wonder why you can perfectly picture your childhood best friend's face, but completely blank on the name of the colleague you just met?
Yes. Happens to me all the time. It's like my brain has selective memory for awkward encounters.
Well, cognitive psychology can actually shed light on why that happens. Then you've got behavioral psychology, which focuses on how we learn through rewards, punishments, and associations. This is why that catchy jingle I mentioned gets stuck in your head.
Or why you trained your dog to sit with treats. Okay, what else?
We have developmental psychology, which looks at how we change throughout our lives, from those tantrum-throwing toddlers to hopefully functioning adults. And we can't forget about clinical psychology, which focuses on diagnosing and treating mental health disorders.
So from everyday quirks to more serious issues, there's a branch of psychology for that. Now, no deep dive on psychology would be complete without mentioning the big man himself, Sigmund Freud. He's like the Elvis of psychology. Everyone knows the name, even if they don't know the hits.
Definitely a household name. And his theories, while often debated, are foundational to understanding how we view the mind.
Let's face it, the whole unconscious mind thing, it's both fascinating and a little creepy. It's like, what's going on in there that we don't even know about?
Yeah, that's exactly what Freud was trying to understand. He believed our minds are like icebergs. With a conscious mind, the thoughts and feelings we are aware of, being just the tip, the vast majority, the unconscious, is hidden beneath the surface.
Okay, so walk us through his whole id, ego, superego thing.
Okay, imagine this. You see a delicious piece of cake in the bakery window. The id, driven by what Freud called the pleasure principle, is screaming, eat it. Eat it now.
Right.
That's your primal instincts. Your immediate desires completely unchecked.
So the id is basically that little devil on your shoulder.
Exactly. Now, on the other shoulder, you got the angel, the superego. That's your internalized sense of right and wrong, the rules you've learned from society and your upbringing. It's saying, don't you dare. You're trying to eat healthy. Think of the calories.
So it's an internal battle between instant gratification and long-term goals. I feel that.
Yes, and that's where the ego comes in. The poor mediator stuck between the id's impulses and the superego's judgments. The ego, governed by the reality principle, tries to find a compromise.
So in the case of the cake, what does the ego do?
Maybe it convinces you to share a slice with a friend, satisfying that desire for cake without completely derailing your healthy eating goals.
Okay, so it's about finding that balance. I can see how this internal struggle plays out in everyday decisions.
Exactly. Now imagine that same scenario, but instead of a cake, it's a situation where you have to choose between speaking up about something you disagree with, or staying silent to avoid conflict.
Ooh, that's getting real.
Mm.
So my desire to speak up is my id, my fear of the consequences is my superego, and my poor ego is trying to figure out the best way to navigate that.
Precisely. Freud believed that unconscious conflicts, often rooted in childhood experiences, could influence our behavior in ways we don't even realize.
Wow, so it's not just about cake. These unconscious drives can really impact our relationships and decisions. Now, while Freud was all about delving into the depths of the unconscious, other psychologists took a different approach. Enter behaviorism. It feels like behaviorism is almost a reaction to Freud's theories.
In a way, it was. So while Freud focused on these internal conflicts, behaviorists like B.F. Skinner wanted to make psychology more scientific, focusing on observable behaviors that could be measured and studied.
So instead of trying to decode the mysteries of the unconscious, it was all about understanding how our environment shapes who we are.
Exactly. They believe that our behaviors are largely a product of learning through conditioning. Think about Pavlov and his dogs, that classic example of classical conditioning. By consistently pairing the sound of a bell with food, he conditioned the dogs to salivate at the sound of the bell alone, even without the food present.
It's like their brains learn to associate the bell with the anticipation of food.
Precisely. And this happens to us all the time. Think about how certain songs or smells can trigger vivid memories or emotions.
Or how just hearing the ice cream truck song brings back that feeling of pure childhood joy even before you actually see the truck.
Exactly. Now let's talk about B.F. Skinner and his work on operant conditioning. The idea that our actions are shaped by their consequences.
This is all about rewards and punishments, right?
Absolutely. Think about it this way. Imagine you're playing a slot machine. You don't know when you're going to win. But those intermittent rewards keep you hooked, right? That's operant conditioning in action. And it's the same principle behind those addictive app notifications that we talked about earlier.
Okay, that's kind of terrifying. I'm never looking at my phone the same way again. But it's not all about these external forces, is it?
Yeah.
I mean, we like to think we have some control over our thoughts and decisions, right?
You're right. And that's where cognitive psychology steps in. It's like the behaviorists kicked open the door to the mind, and then the cognitive psychologists came in and they're like, hold on. There's a whole lot more going on in here than just stimulus and response.
So it's not just about how our environment shapes us. It's about how we actively process information, make sense of the world, maybe even trick ourselves along the way.
Exactly. Cognitive biases are a perfect example. These are mental shortcuts our brains use to simplify information and make decisions quickly. But these shortcuts can also lead to some pretty irrational and sometimes hilarious errors in judgment.
Okay, I need an example. Give me your best cognitive bias story.
Have you ever heard of confirmation bias?
I feel like I've heard of that, yeah.
It's the tendency to favor information that confirms our existing beliefs, while ignoring evidence that contradicts them. Like, imagine someone who's convinced their horoscope is always accurate. They might remember all the times it seemed right and conveniently forget all the times it was completely off.
Oh, I know people like that. They're always like, see, it said I would have a lucky day and I found $1 on the street.
Huh.
Confirmation bias, I'm adding that to my psychological lexicon.
It's a good one to know. Now, let's talk about emotions. We've covered how we think, we've covered how we learn, but emotions are like the wild card in the game of life.
It's like that saying, the heart wants what the heart wants, even if our brain is telling us otherwise. So how do we even begin to understand this messy world of emotions?
Well, imagine you're watching a scary movie. Your heart is pounding. You're gripping the armrest, maybe even jumping a mile at every little sound. The physical sensations are definitely there. But how do you know you're feeling fear?
I guess because, I don't know, it's a scary movie. Like, the context makes it obvious.
Exactly. That's the beauty of the two-factor theory of emotion. It suggests that their emotions are not just about our physical responses, but also how we interpret those responses based on the situation that we're in. So that racing heart in a scary movie means fear. But that same racing heart on a roller coaster might be interpreted as excitement.
Oh, that's so interesting. So our brains are constantly scanning our environment for clues to help us label these physical sensations that we're experiencing.
Exactly. And that's why it's so easy to misinterpret emotions, especially in ambiguous situations. Think about those butterflies you get before a big presentation. Is it fear? Is it excitement? Or some weird combination of both? It really depends on how you interpret those sensations.
Okay, that makes so much sense. I'm starting to see how understanding all these subtle psychological mechanisms can really change how we view our own experiences and even our interactions. Speaking of interactions, let's talk about personality. that unique blend of traits that makes each of us who we are.
Exactly. Personality psychology tries to answer the question of why, given the same situation, people react in completely different ways.
Like why some people are drawn to skydiving, while others would prefer just like a quiet night in with a good book.
Exactly. One of the most popular models for understanding personality is the Big Five, which identifies 5 core traits that exist on a spectrum: openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism.
Okay, break it down for me. What do those traits actually look like in real life?
Okay, well, someone high in openness tends to be curious, imaginative, and open to new experiences. They might be drawn to creative pursuits, unconventional ideas, exploring different cultures. On the other hand, someone lower in openness might prefer routine, structure, familiarity. They'd rather stick to what they know and feel most comfortable in familiar surroundings.
So you're saying it's the difference between someone who books a solo trip to backpack through Southeast Asia versus someone who prefers a relaxing vacation to the same beach town every year.
Precisely. Now let's talk about conscientiousness. This trait is all about being organized, responsible, and self-disciplined. High conscientiousness is linked to planning ahead, following through on commitments, generally being on top of things.
So those friends who always show up on time and have like color-coded calendars, those are your high conscientiousness folks.
You got it. And they probably make really detailed to-do lists too. On the other end of the spectrum, someone lower in conscientiousness might be more spontaneous, flexible, maybe a little less concerned with order and structure.
Yeah. Okay, I can see how those two extremes might clash in a shared living situation.
Definitely. Now, extroversion is all about how energized you are by social interaction. Extroverts thrive in social settings, they love meeting new people, and they generally seek out stimulation and excitement. Introverts, on the other hand, are often more reserved and prefer quieter environments with fewer people. They recharge their batteries with solitude and find large social gatherings draining.
So it's not just about being shy or outgoing, it's more about where you get your energy from. I'm totally an extrovert, give me all the social interaction.
And there's nothing wrong with that. Both introversion and extroversion have their strengths. Now, agreeableness refers to how empathetic, cooperative, and trusting someone is. Highly agreeable people are often described as warm, kind, and compassionate. They're the friends who are always willing to lend a listening ear and put others before themselves.
They're the friends everyone goes to for advice.
What about the last one, neuroticism? I feel like that one always gets a bad rap. It's not as scary as it sounds. Neuroticism is essentially about emotional stability. Someone high in neuroticism tends to experience more negative emotions, like anxiety, worry, and sadness. They might be more sensitive to stress and prone to self-doubt.
So those friends that are always worrying about something, even if it's something small.
Exactly. And again, it's a spectrum, not a black and white label.
Yeah.
Now, someone lower in neuroticism is generally more calm, even-keeled, and resilient. They don't sweat the small stuff and can handle stressful situations with more grace.
This is all making me think about my own friendships and relationships. I'm already trying to pinpoint everyone's big 5 traits in my head.
It is fascinating to think about, isn't it? And while the Big Five doesn't capture every single nuance of personality, it does provide a really helpful framework for understanding ourselves and the people around us. But you have to keep in mind, personality is complex. It's influenced by a combination of genetics, upbringing, and life experiences.
Right. It's like that whole nature versus nurture debate. How much of who we are is predetermined and how much is shaped by our environment.
Exactly, and that's a debate that psychologists have been grappling with for decades.
Well, wherever you stand on that debate, it's clear that understanding personality can have a huge impact on our relationships, our careers, and even our overall well-being. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of psychology, mental health. It feels like mental health awareness is finally getting, like the attention it deserves these days, and psychology obviously plays a huge role in that.
Absolutely, yeah, psychology has given us so many tools and therapies to help people navigate mental health challenges.
Sure.
From, anxiety and depression to like more complex conditions.
Yeah, and it's not just about like slapping a Band-Aid on the problem. It's about really understanding like the root causes and developing personalized strategies for healing and growth. Speaking of strategies, can you talk about some of the most, effective therapy approaches out there?
Yeah, one that's been incredibly impactful is cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT as it's often called. And it's based on this idea that our thoughts, our feelings, and our behaviors, they're all interconnected. So if you can change the way you think, you can change the way you feel and act.
Okay, so it's not just about talking about your problems. It's about actively rewiring those thought patterns. How does that work in practice?
So imagine someone who's constantly plagued by negative self-talk. I'm not good enough, I'm going to fail, like that kind of thing. CBT would help them identify those thoughts and then challenge their validity.
So it's like you're playing devil's advocate with your own brain.
Exactly. So the therapist would guide them to question those negative thoughts, look for evidence to support or refute them, and ultimately replace them with more balanced and realistic ones.
It's about breaking free from those self-sabotaging thought loops. That can really, hold us back. What about other therapy approaches, though? Is CBT like the end-all be-all?
CBT is fantastic, and it works for a lot of people, but it's not, one size fits all. And that's why it's so important to find a therapist who resonates with you and uses an approach that aligns with your needs. Another really powerful modality is humanistic therapy.
Okay, I've heard of that. What's the main difference between, humanistic therapy and CBT?
So while CBT primarily focuses on thoughts and behaviors, humanistic therapy emphasizes the individual's inherent capacity for growth and what we call self-actualization. It's about creating a safe and supportive space for self-exploration and discovery.
So less about fixing problems and more about empowering people to, become the best versions of themselves. I love that.
Exactly. It's about tapping into your inner resources and finding your own path to healing and fulfillment. And there are so many other approaches out there: psychodynamic therapy, mindfulness-based therapy, art therapy, the list goes on.
Right, it's like a whole buffet of therapeutic options. But no matter what approach resonates with you, I think the most important thing is to reach out for help when you need it, which, I'll just add, is a sign of strength, not weakness.
I could not agree with you more. And remember, mental health is a journey, not a destination. There will be ups, there will be downs, but having the right tools and support can make all the difference.
This whole deep dive into psychology has been amazing. I feel like I have, a whole new perspective on why people do the things they do.
And that's really the beauty of psychology, isn't it?
Yeah.
Peeling back the layers of human behavior and gaining a deeper understanding of what makes us tick.
And the best part is this is really just the tip of the iceberg. There's always more to learn, more to explore, more to discover in the fascinating world of psychology.
Yeah, it's a field that's constantly evolving, which makes it all the more exciting.
Well, on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of psychology. It's not goodbye. It's more like, see you in your next therapy session.
Or in your next internal debate between that slice of cake and your healthy eating goals.
Touché. Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey into the human mind. Until next time, keep those brains engaged. And remember, sometimes the most fascinating discoveries are the ones we make about ourselves.
Before we wrap up this mind-bending episode, if you're loving the deep dive into psychology, make sure to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more insights that will change the way you see yourself and the world around you. And hey, if you've got burning questions or ideas you want us to explore, drop them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Stay curious and remember, understanding yourself is the first step toward unlocking your full potential.